Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Mat Chat, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Much like the gear that my guest is wearing, the executive director of USA Wrestling, Rich Bender. Rich, thanks for coming on.
Man, my pleasure, Dave. And thanks for all that you're doing for our sport, man. You're making a big difference.
I appreciate it. Last year was the first full year with USA Wrestling, and the numbers were the best they've ever been for us. And hopefully we're getting better, but I think that has as much to do with the platform as it does the product. So I want to publicly thank you and Gary Abbott and Mike and Joe Wedra and everybody else that has taken turns making sure we get on the air on a regular cadence and putting us on the website and putting us in the emails. And I run into people now that don't recognize my face but my voice. So I told my dad I got a face for radio, so we're kind of
unfortunately, I think we both do, maybe.
For sure. So I saw you Saturday at the bout on the ballpark, and really cool thing to be a part of. We're gonna really chop it up on the other podcast that we do weekly on Thursday. What were your thoughts on how it went?
Well, I thought it was a great night for the sport, and I think anytime that you can kind of break tradition and expose and elevate your sport, and I specifically wrestling on a new platform. I mean, second base at Globe Life Arena is certainly a unique platform for our sport. One of the nicest and most technologically advanced facilities, maybe in the United States for sure. And I think it was a great opportunity for our fans to kind of consume our sport a little bit differently, and it's overall a great night for wrestling.
And it's very interesting. When I was first working for track wrestling, sort of commenting on USA Wrestling events differently. Now that I'm on your platform representing the brand, I think you look at it more from the inside out than the outside in, is maybe a fair way to say it. So I know I don't think what I'm saying is news, that you guys had, cancellations and had to reschedule things. You're one of the most organized people I know. As somebody this is a selfish question, just somebody who runs events. When you start with a plan A, do you already have a plan B in place? And if so, how does that work?
Well, and yes, I mean, just like you do, right? We had plan Bs from the start, and unfortunately there were times when our plan A looked like it was pretty good and was going to come to fruition. And when we talked about the opportunity a long time ago, over a year ago, I think we had our first conversations with the folks with Rev Entertainment and the Texas Rangers and Oklahoma State University and the University of Iowa. We thought about, what was, how could we make the biggest impact for wrestling, and how, obviously Oklahoma State and Iowa represent the, two of the most storied programs in college wrestling history. And if you look at it from an international perspective, USA Wrestling and Iran, and at the time, Japan on the women's side, still represent, the two of the more storied programs in worldwide wrestling. So, we thought that would make the biggest impact, and immediately started with a plan B, knowing the challenges that go into, securing the necessary documentation and visas to bring a team like the Iranians to our country. But with all that said, we until very late in the process, we thought we'd made it over every hurdle. And usually the biggest hurdle with the Iranian team is, and we don't have normalized relations with Iran. So every time they come to the United States, they have to go abroad to a U.S. embassy to interview and start the visa process. And usually that's where we run into trouble. And that is getting their team and their delegation to another post or another embassy outside of Iran to do their interviews, because that's just the first part of the process. They do the interviews, and then the process of evaluating and issuing the visa starts by the U.S. government. that normally has been where we've run into trouble. It's just that, they miss an interview or they just aren't where they need to be. Well, we were able to get to that point. In fact, we invited 18 members of the Iranian Federation, or Iranian delegation of 18 members to come to the United States, and they showed up with 35, and we were able to secure 29 of the 35 visas. And unfortunately, there was some unfortunate circumstances that happened along the way that made it really difficult for all 35 visas to be issued. And I think the rest is a little bit history. But back to answer your original question, yeah, we had a plan B, and knew that we had some athletes in country that if push come to shove, we could go to. We didn't want to.
Sure.
We felt like the Iranian team posed the best opportunity for us to elevate wrestling and promote the sport, and we knew we could put together some kind of an all-star team just based on the number of athletes that are in our country now or close that don't have the same kind of documents or visa challenges. And then on the women's side, we held out with Japan. Had asked us to wait because they had some pretty significant travel restrictions on their team, and our plan B was Mongolia, and ironically, on the women's side, we ended up with a plan C, and so we're able to, by God's grace, we had the Canadian team training in Phoenix at ASU, and we're able to change some tickets and get them to Arlington on Saturday night. But yeah, a lot of, whether it's plan A, plan B, as you have to pivot a lot. And when it comes back to the Iranian delegation issue, this would have been the 17th time they've been to the States to wrestle, and every single one of those times it takes almost seamless cooperation between USA Wrestling and the Wrestling Federation of the Islamic Republic of Iran to go through the proper channels and steps to make sure that we get it done. And unfortunately, that's not how it worked this time. We had some people that, I think thought that there was some opportunities for some political gain or involvement that there's no place for that in our sport. And, unfortunately, for reasons outside of our control, they didn't show up, but a great event for wrestling nonetheless.
No, it was fantastic. Your political astuteness is one of the things that I really admire. Like, I get to coach younger guys, and I tell them all the time, like, the number one thing, and I went to college a long time ago, so I don't know if they're teaching it, but they didn't then, is the importance of networking and the importance of not just like, I know that person, but like, I want to work with that person. I respect that person. They know enough about me that they would hire me or give me a shot. And, I think the reason why I'm on your air is because of the relationships that, especially like my father and mother have with you guys at USA Wrestling. Like, I get to trade on their name for a long time until I screw it up. And you're so good at it. And, when you made that statement about, and I want to rephrase it exactly how you said it, that, people were looking to maybe gain political capital out of a non-political capital event. That's got to be tough, because just, you don't work with these people in an isolated situation. This is an ongoing situation. Iran and USA are two of the best, I would say conservatively, the best 5 countries in the world in wrestling on the men's freestyle side. Let me go back to like the overall event, and I'm going to just pick one kid because he did something very unique, like Fix wrestles for USA. And then, like, his mom told me, then he had to make weight for the Iowa Oklahoma State meet and then wrestle. You've obviously known John and Derek and Dayton, all these guys come through your system. You've probably seen almost every first there is to see, just that one specific thing. How cool was that to see?
Well, it's pretty cool. And obviously, Dayton Fix represents what's good in our sport. And I think it's, he's a hardworking kid and obviously incredibly talented, willing to, do about anything and to wrestle. And, I think it's, you've been around his parents, you don't, like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And Dayton's just, there's a lot of cool things ahead for Dayton Fix. And for him to be in that situation where, right, he had to make weight twice, he had to wrestle twice. And, obviously on the international side, he was pretty successful pretty quickly. But right, I mean, I said to somebody at the event that I don't think wrestling Austin DeSanto is a very pleasant experience for anybody. And
Win or lose, you got to
win
bring your
or
lunch
lose.
bucket.
And
Yeah.
so, obviously it's pretty inspirational to see him step forward and win two really good matches. And that match with Iowa was, man, that's two really good wrestlers going at it there. And but Dayton, he's not one to back down from any kind of challenge. And, I think John probably would have preferred that he wrestled Mr. DeSanto first.
Yeah.
But, nonetheless, that's the way it worked out. And, we're grateful that they allowed it to happen, because I think, it's pretty cool to see, an athlete really successful in both disciplines. And the college season is a grind for sure. And, Dayton hasn't taken a step back on his international preparation, because, for him, it's, it's a process, right? He has every intentions of having a very successful NCAA career and, being a world and Olympic champion. So not an either or proposition for him. He's figuring out how to do both.
Yeah. I haven't talked to you even in person off the air, certainly on the air, since the Olympics and then the World Championships. And if you picked either one of those events, it would be there'd be no way you couldn't call it a major success, especially on the freestyle side of things. But when you combine those two and you look at how many medals, how many gold medals, and especially with the Olympics, because as you well know, though, you probably know it better than me, those are the ones where the casual people watch for 16 days, sports they never watch, the Mensa Stocks, the DTs, the Gable Stevensons of the world. And, I do some play-by-play, but I think what JB and JW did in terms of escalating the play-by-play, and really watching John basically coach and then once in a while tell people what the score was. As one of the quarterbacks of this thing, what were your emotions? What were your thoughts? How did you view that sort of 90-day window there?
Well, it was pretty cool to see. And, obviously to think about what happened in Tokyo and how resilient that team had to be to just get there. And, to compete to the level that they competed. And I mean, 9 medals, it kind of speaks for itself, right? The most medals ever won by an American wrestling team in a non-boycotted games ever.
Yeah.
And in an incredibly different or difficult environment, right? We talked earlier about plan A, plan B. I mean, there were times where we were down to plan F in terms of what was going to be, what was our plan and how we needed to pivot on things here and there. And I mean, obviously it's great to see success in those really high profile events like the Olympic Games, and then to follow it up with a world championship. It speaks to the depth of American wrestling, and that's not about USA Wrestling necessarily. It's the depth of wrestling in our country and how good we are and how we are, continuing to make strides amongst, all nations of the world to be, a wrestling powerhouse. And, it was interesting to see in, guys like Thomas Gilman, right, who probably should have been an Olympic champion, but wasn't, and never once slid his foot off the gas pedal and, became, world champion, just a couple months later. Same thing with Kyle Dake. And it's just inspirational to be around those wrestlers and those athletes, and Adeline Gray and Helen Marolis and, Tremere Mensa, and, to see to see that range of emotion from, what, David Taylor was feeling in Tokyo to what he was feeling in Oslo, and just flip-flop that with Adeline Gray from what she was feeling in Tokyo and what she was feeling in Oslo of, being able to have the ultimate success and being world or Olympic champions is cool. But man, I'll tell you what, those athletes deserve every single ounce of the credit. They're so resilient. I mean, to think about what we threw at them in terms of selection procedures and requirements around COVID protocols and getting to Tokyo and the requirements once they got to Tokyo and to look at that performance. I mean, we were the best team in my opinion in both events. And it's just pretty inspirational and cool to see.
Well, and you probably won't say this, you're not allowed to politically, but you or us or them, however you want to call USA Wrestling, didn't have to come up with a different name to compete because your country is known for illegal drug use. So,
yeah,
so
we'll leave it at that.
yeah,
And yeah,
I think,
yeah,
yeah,
we'll leave it at that.
I, as you were talking, a thought came to me, and I am super interested in your perspective on this because you sit in a different chair. Should high school and college go to freestyle?
Well, certainly from my perspective, we should, and I'm a huge folk style wrestling fan. I mean, I love the sport. I love to watch it, and one of my favorite experiences all year is the NCAA Division I championships, and I love the style. I think, ultimately, if you were to start over and say, hey, does it make sense for us to wrestle a different discipline than every other country in the world? Probably doesn't make the most sense in terms of building it that way. But I mean, I'm a monster freestyle fan, obviously too. I think they're different, but I mean, it was cool to see on Saturday night, right? The two disciplines on display at a pretty high platform, and you'll have your aficionados on both sides, right? That say one is better than the other. I mean, I love them both. Certainly I can assure you that if we ever were to be able to combine to one discipline, hell would have no fury than an American wrestling system all on one style. So, I assure you that our performance would be through the roof on the international stage. But man, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of years and a lot of history that goes into folk style wrestling. And, we owe a lot of our success to that system for sure.
Yeah, I think the one tangent maybe is that folk style wrestling is a really good base for MMA, and a lot of wrestlers are making careers in MMA. And when you have a sport where if you can't turn them, you let them go, versus a sport where you're rewarded for holding guys down, that's a skill that wrestlers learned. We all learned it when we wrestled. Like, if I can't get up, it's going to be a long day. I can't just hang out for 20 seconds and get out. And so that's another sidebar to it. But it is amazing how these kids, and I say primarily men, because, the college women's season doesn't get followed the same way, that the men's Division I season, but like these kids that'll go straight from the collegiate season. And like, I think about Jaden in 16, that I had a very interesting conversation with Mike Ironman after he won the trials. I said, I'll bet you $100 I'm about to say is true. He goes, okay. I said, and you can tell me because you're the only one. I said, if Jaden got taken down, you told him to just, if he felt anything tight, just to stand up because you didn't have time to work on gut wrench or leg lace defense. He goes, I'm not paying you, but you're not wrong. So like,
that reminds me a little bit of the conversation at camp with Gable Stevenson about parterre defense. And he told Coach Zadig, says, Coach, I got you. Don't worry, I'm not getting taken down. And obviously, almost cost him, but it was kind of a similar scenario.
Yeah. Well, to go to that Gable match, like we've all been taught, wrestle to the whistle, don't give up. You never know what can happen. And I'm a finance guy. And I was talking to a friend of mine one day, I go, how much do you think 1 second, literally 1 second, maybe a second and a half, maybe 0.6 of a second, depending on how you interpret what happened there, changed his life economically. And we guess maybe $5 million, depending, down the line. But, that lesson was such a valuable one. Just keep going, don't quit. Or, John, snap, go get it, snap, go get it, snap. So,
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a funny little sidebar in that scenario, and it was I believe it was Eggum that told the story that in that scenario, obviously, he got taken down and turned a couple times, and in the back right after the match, obviously, which is somewhat traditional, right? People were going through the match of what just happened, and Gable says, when we went out of bounds and I fought the gut wrench the second time and I kind of, got my bearing on what was happening. And he said, I thought to myself, there's no hope. There's no hope now. And he said, I looked over at Pep Jafili and he took this big, deep breath and went, and he said, I thought to myself, oh, there's hope.
really?
Yeah. And so that's, maybe that's just a myth, but it was a pretty good story. I almost laughed till I cried when I heard it. But it's, so true, right? I mean, in a normal sense of, most circumstances, there wasn't hope, but knowing, what he had put into it and, how much conditioning plays a factor in the sport. And, it's funny what little things give people big hope, and I think, just a deep breath with what was there, I don't remember, 15 seconds left or something when that whole scenario started.
Yeah.
And, he went from, oh, there's no hope now to, oh, there's hope.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say, like, if you think there's hope, you're right. If you think there's no hope, you're right.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Was a pretty cool story.
That's an amazing story. I'm going to go back and watch the match and see if I can pick up the body language.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes that watch these podcasts. And I mean, I think there's two ways to look at that. One is never give up. And two is when you got the lead, don't show weakness, right?
That's
Like turn your back and make that deep breath where the guy can't see you, make that deep breath or take 3 small ones or something. So, one of the things that I think is I'm a little envious of your job is all the relationships you have with people at really high level. And, I understand there's a business side to it, that you guys have to work with certain people, but there's genuine friendships that I see, like you with the athletes, you with the coaches. And that segues into something, and I don't think I've ever publicly thanked you but a couple of years ago when I was at track wrestling, Lee Pritz got me an interview with Art Martori. And he hadn't done an interview in like 10 years. And so I called a bunch of people and got a bunch of quotes or stories or things to ask him about. And my mom's a communications teacher. And so she teaches you ask open-ended questions, not closed ones, all these, I don't want to call them tricks, but strategies, whatever, skill set. I forgot all of them. And I asked like 14 questions and we're 8 minutes in and there's nothing left. There's literally nothing left. And I go, well, Rich Bender told me about this time, and I can't remember. I got it wrong. He corrected me if it was dune buggies or snowmobiles, but that you guys were in one, and that Art had tried to kill you, and he goes, no, it was the other one, and then the interview just took off, and so I've been blessed to interview some amazing people, but probably one of the most reclusive people, and one of the people that literally has had the most impact on our sport is Art Martori, and you saved it. So I just wanted to thank you for that publicly. And then tell the story again, because I don't remember all the details.
Well, and by the way, I owe my career to Art Martori. I mean, he's been, an incredible mentor for me, and right. I mean, this sport owes fewer people more than it owes Art Martori, and especially USA Wrestling. And I've said this several times, right? There's no more consequential figure in the history of our organization than Art Martori. And, you don't have to, go very far to talk to very many athletes to realize the impact that he's had on so many. And obviously guys like John Smith and Kenny Monday, and the greats. That's they'll all turn back to art when it comes to who's most responsible. But the story that you're talking about is so every year at the Sun, when we had the Dave Schultz tournament here in Colorado Springs, Art would bring his snowmobiles up to Colorado and we go snowmobiling. And if you've been around Art much, that he really likes nice things and he really likes fast things. So his snowmobiles don't just run on regular gasoline. It's like plain fuel and high level machines. And so, and Art, and I always had the pleasure of riding his sleds. And so the very first time we're out snowmobiling, and we're going down a trail, and these snowmobiles run fast. I mean, not uncommon to go 100 miles an hour on these sleds.
Okay.
And so he kind of lets me go out ahead a little bit. And I'm, being respectful of his equipment and his machine. I'm, taking it kind of easy. And I'm, probably going 80 down this, kind of a little bit of a dicey trail. And Art comes up beside me, pedal to the metal, and slams right into the side of me. And I mean, literally, I'm like taking the sled sideways, and I get it stopped, and he stops next to me, and he's just laughing like, "You got to have fun, Rich. You got to have fun." So I spent the entire next 2 days with my hair on fire, going as fast as that snowmobile could go to stay ahead of Art Martori, so he wouldn't run me into a tree or off the trail. So the true story.
I love the story. Selfishly, I just love it that it saved my podcast because yeah, it was great. So that reminds me, when I think it was 2015, you would know when the World Championships were in Vegas. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I was staying at Couture's house, and he takes me out that night, me and my girlfriend at the time, and his girlfriend, in this dune buggy. And it's a death trap on wheels, like it's a cage, and there's no light. And we're riding, and all of a sudden my ex-girlfriend starts screaming. I'm like, what's wrong? And on her side, we're about 1.5 feet from just a cliff. And the whole time it's like, boom, boom, boom. She's like, I go, don't scream, we can't distract him.
Yeah.
We all go. So I think like some of these guys that are really good at stuff, they're just bored with everyday challenges, and they want something a little special. So
for sure.
All right. So you share a birthday with Coach Smith, Coach John Smith, correct?
Yeah, the exact same birthday, same day, same month, same year.
All right. So who's a better fisherman?
Well, so let's make no bones about this. He's definitely a better wrestler. I mean, no question there.
I don't think that you're breaking news, but okay.
In fact, he's not just the best wrestler between those people born on August 9th either. He's the best wrestler, period. But when it comes to fish, I have to tell you, I'm a better fisherman than he is. He gets to do it a lot more than I do, but he's certainly not in the same class as me when it comes to our fishing skills, for sure.
Well, so my dad has been blessed to go fishing with you guys a couple times. And people that don't know my dad, he's a very quiet guy. He's very Japanese. He's a very introspective. And he actually started down at those camps. I was doing the camps. And I called John. I said, would you like my dad to be a counselor? He's like, that'd be great. And he came down. And then when I stopped going, now him and my mom go without me, which is probably better. It's probably better for everybody. He's a better counselor and a coach than I would be anyway. He's not running around late at night, but they go fishing. And like my dad, one time he just called me. He goes, that was crazy. I go, what happened? He goes, I don't even know how many fish we caught. He goes, but listen to those two guys just go at each other for a couple hours.
Hey, I got to tell you a funny story. So this weekend down at the ballpark, so the associate AD that oversees wrestling is a guy named Anthony Petro. I don't know if you know Anthony. He was down at the event. Okay. So he's John's kind of boss and a really good fisherman.
Okay.
And we were talking this weekend, and he was telling me the story about the first time he went fishing with John. you know, I think he's a, he comes from finance. So, you know, a numbers guy, and maybe a finance major in college. And he said he shows up and he catches a nice bass, you know, and he pulls out this scale, like, and John comes over, he goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, this is a big bass. I want to weigh it." John goes, "Don't ever bring that around here again. We don't weigh fish here." And and I said, "Well, what did he say the bass weighed?" "Oh, he said it weighed like 8.5 pounds and it was like 6."
You got the 40% Coach Smith bump.
Yeah. So one thing I promise you, if you ever go fishing with John, there'll never be a scale anywhere in sight, because he's got his own scale, and it swings really heavy on his side
and light on your side.
I know this for sure, that the same bass caught by John Smith and me, when he's reporting, the fish that I caught is 5 pounds, the one he caught was 10.
And they're both 7.5. Is that about right? So you mentioned the NCAAs and how that's an event you truly enjoy. And one of the things that's really interesting about that event is how much people root for specific teams. And I remember when I was at track for 1 year, the World Cup was at Carver Hawkeye. I don't remember which year. I know it's been there a bunch of times. And I was lucky enough to do interviews on the floor. And I came up and I was talking to Mark Perry Jr. And I said, "You know what's interesting to me?" He said, "What's that?" And I go, "If Iowa was wrestling Oklahoma State or Penn State, 15,000, 16,000 people would be here. USA is wrestling Iran, Russia, you know, the best countries in the world, and there's 5,000 people here." And that's probably more than you'd get anywhere else. I mean, that's why it's there. I'm sure you guys are smart, you know, the demographics, you're making smart economic deals. What does what does USA Wrestling have to do? And I make this statement and people get mad at me. I'm like, people root for the laundry. Like people, like, you know, when you're at the bottom of the ballpark, if you walk into that Texas Live, everybody's wearing black and gold or black and orange, you know, like I was the only one wearing a USA Wrestling jacket, and I intentionally only packed blue jackets and not black ones so that nobody would think I was on either side. So what are some things that USA Wrestling can do, or the athletes can do, to try to get that same level of support as these tight-knit communities?
Well, what we did this weekend's part of it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's exposing, I mean, that's been, you know, forever, as long as you and I've been alive, right? That's been the foundational fan base for our sport. It's been around college wrestling programs, and obviously, you know, high school wrestling programs as well, but not to the same level or affinity. And I think, you know, the more that we can expose, you know, the college wrestling community to the international discipline, the better it is for everybody. And it's, you know, we're not there yet, obviously, I mean, you're accurate, right? We, you know, outside of the Olympic trials, we have a hard time filling up Carver Hawkeye Arena, right? And whether it's Iran or Russia or anyone, you know, it's a struggle, and you know, takes a lot of work to move those kind of numbers. But I think the more we can associate and expose those traditional fans to the international discipline, the better. And you know, the cool thing right now is that you know, we're not trying. We don't have to really work hard to sell them once they see it. I mean, because you know, Team USA is really good right now and successful and fun to watch. So I mean, I think it's exposing you know, our programs to theirs, and you know, I think the more we can lean on regional training centers to kind of access those traditional collegiate fan bases, the better. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's complicated. I think it just comes down to exposing those fans that have an affinity for their college program to the international. I mean, we're all on Team USA, right? We all are on one team when it comes to, you know, the US team. So that's not the challenge. The challenge is, how do you draw that affinity that someone might have for the University of Iowa's wrestling program to Team USA? And I think it starts with exposure.
Do you think there's any argument to, like, if you're a Penn State fan or say you're an Iowa fan and now it's weird rooting for David Taylor. Like if you're a Penn State fan, now it's weird rooting for Dayton Fix. Like, if you're one of those two fans, it's hard to root for Gable Stevenson. Now, I saw that in the Iowa-Minnesota duel, and, Iowa's fans have caught some heat for what happened with Gomez, but they gave Gable Stevenson a standing ovation like they do. They're like St. Louis baseball fans. Like they recognize greatness when they see it. But do you think maybe that's part of what's building
For
that
sure. No doubt about it, right? There's no doubt about the fact that, there's some that when, Thomas Gilman steps on the mat, there's probably some Oklahoma State fans that, aren't nearly as enthusiastic about it as they are when, Dayton Fix is out there. So yeah, I think there's some of that, but our success at the top end at the international and Olympic games, I think really goes a long way to bring the community together. Because right, America likes winners, and whether you wrestle at the University of Iowa or Penn State or Oklahoma State or any one of the college wrestling programs, if you have success on the international stage, I think you bring a lot of fans with you.
Yeah, and obviously women's wrestling is a huge growth part of the sport, and for those of us that are old enough to know, besides the fact that wrestling is a great sport which affects people's character and how they live their lives, and gender should have nothing to do with that. It's also great from the Title IX perspective, and that it helps keep programs alive because there's the female equivalent of it. When I was at track wrestling, Andy Hamilton would always talk to me about the importance of storylines. And, I came to track from coaching. And when you're coaching, the storyline is we beat everybody 15-0 or pin them. You don't want there to be a storyline. You don't want it to be close. You understand other people that don't have a horse in the race feel that way. But, like I just want my guys to win. I don't care if that's boring or not. But because college wrestling is not prevalent yet at the female level at the Power 5 schools, it's coming. Obviously, Iowa's leading the way. It feels like USA Wrestling has got a chance to really help these young athletes, especially like the age group ones, write storylines that can help these young ladies get into the lexicon, get into just the daily thought process of wrestling fans.
No doubt about it. And if you look at the, what's the pillars for success within the U.S. Olympic movement, not just talking about wrestling in terms of, what raised the relevancy of the Olympic Games, and, why is it so relevant to America? And that's the storylines, right? It's the up close and personal and stories that NBC invests in. Now, obviously, it's unfortunately this past week it hasn't been to the same level that it has been in past Olympic Games, but yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, USA Wrestling has a big opportunity to help build heroes and bring women that are having a lot of success in our sport to the mainstream. And I think we have an opportunity to do it. And the really neat thing is that we have a group of athletes that really have some great stories and are some just wonderful examples of what's right with America.
Yeah, I was at the PFL finale and got to meet Tamira and Jakara, and couldn't be nicer. Like sometimes these people that have won a lot are arrogant and off-putting, or make somebody feel beneath them. And same thing like when I had Clarissa Chun on. She's like, I watch your podcast. I'm like, oh, that's nice. You're the one. That kind of thing. So yeah, but I think, when you think about the lessons that wrestling has taught all of us, and, in a lot of ways, like I was a minority kid that got picked on a lot until I learned how to wrestle. And it really did change my life in a meaningful way. And my dad didn't force it on me, even though like a lot of people probably thought he would because he was a coach. But I was tired of, I'll say, getting my tail kicked, keep it super PG. And I was like, show me. And, he taught me some different martial arts and that. And those lessons are valuable regardless of gender. And so,
Dave, I believe this statement to be true, that once you've wrestled, you're better, period. And I don't think there's an exception to that story. I think once someone has wrestled, they're better. And, obviously a lot of us, haven't had the success of on the mat like some have, but we're better people because of our association and experience, and life lessons that you're touching upon have made everyone that's participated in our sport better. And just it's what's special about wrestling. And it's funny you talk about Tamara, and I one of my striking memories of Tokyo was standing in the mix zone right after Tamara just obviously won the match of the biggest match of her life and become an Olympic champion, and to watch the media when she came around into the mix zone, and cameras everywhere, and the questions around America were so led, right, trying to lead her to an answer. And when she just blurted out, "I love this freaking country," it was so, for me, the hair on the back of my neck just stood up. And for some of the media, I know they were disappointed with that response, but man, she just did such a good job of articulating her true feelings about the sport of wrestling and our country and the support system that exists for her to wrestle. It was really cool. And someone like that, it's easy to look at and say, hey, wrestling's made her a better person. But man, it's not just Tamara Mensah. Anyone that's ever had the pleasure of participating in our sport, have become better for it.
Yeah, a lot of my non-wrestling friends will hang out with me and my wrestling friends, and they're afterwards like, "Did you guys wrestle together?" I'm like, "Oh, no. Like, we're not even the same age." And they're like, "Well, what's the deal? You guys seem like best friends." I'm like, I think there's this level of respect. And sometimes there's more respect for the person that wasn't good because they went to practice knowing they were going to get their face smashed in every day and kept coming back, or the drill partner that made you better so you could win, that kind of thing. And yeah, it's different. I mean to criticize, but it's not like golf. Golf, you're playing the course, you're not playing the other person, and nobody gets to hit you with a club if they win. Like we're in wrestling, you take those beatings. So we just got a couple minutes left. Is there anybody over at USA Wrestling that you want to, maybe get a shout out to that doesn't maybe get the shine that they normally get?
Well, I'll tell you, and I'm so proud of this team here and what we've went through in the last 2 years, because wrestling, we shouldn't be having the success that we're having. We should, it just, people look at wrestling and say, man, wrestling and social distancing, that's the antithesis of one another. Why? How can you even exist in this environment? And I'll tell you what, I'm so blessed to work every day with a team of professionals here at USA Wrestling that, man, they're motivated to make a sport better that's impacted their life. And man, I'd be remiss or be making a big mistake if I started to just call out certain people. Yeah. But man, I'll tell you, it's cool to see and a really awesome thing to be a part of. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make a shout out to one person, and that's Bruce Baumgartner. And Bruce Baumgartner, Bruce doesn't get paid. He's a volunteer president of the USA Wrestling Board of Directors, and you write him 13-time World Olympic medalist, 4-time Olympic medalist, carried the flag, and his story. But
legend, absolute legend.
Yeah, an absolute legend. But I think about last couple of years what the sport's been through, and in the leadership that he provided for us. Obviously, there was some seasons of discontent within that time frame, whether some social justice issues and COVID issues, and having a solid, rock solid leader that, it's an athlete might be disgruntled, and Bruce gets on the phone with them, and they're going to tell Bruce what it's like to be a wrestler, or what they need. But he's been someone that never shied away from work or a call, and just really helped empower our staff to do what they've done in the last couple of years. And we're coming off arguably the best year in the history of USA Wrestling from a lot of perspectives, right? We talked earlier about the competitive success we've had, and USA Wrestling operates around 4 core business principles: growing the brand, building the base, networking the wrestling community, and sustain competitive excellence. And when you think about sustained competitive excellence, I mean, what we accomplished last year as an organization and in teams, we won more medals than any year in the history of USA Wrestling. We had, from a membership perspective, in November of this year, or November of last year, so what is that, 3-4 months ago?
Yeah.
Was the largest revenue month in the history of USA Wrestling when it comes to membership. Largest revenue month ever in the history of USA Wrestling. Wow. In November of 2021. We followed that up with the biggest revenue month ever, biggest revenue December ever from a membership perspective. Biggest January from a membership revenue perspective ever was last month. And that doesn't just happen because, we're a couple of good guys or hardworking people, around, but that's a network in the wrestling community stepping forward. I mean, we had 6,400 entries at junior nationals last year, which was over 1,000 more than any junior nationals in history. And I think that's a testament to the infrastructure that exists in our sport, our state chapters working really hard to provide the opportunity for kids to be exposed to the sport. Great governance and leadership from the USA Wrestling board. Great team here at USA Wrestling and people that are, burning the candle at both ends when that needs to be the case. And you're really doing it for the love of the sport. And man, we're on the precipice of the golden age of wrestling. We are. I mean, with women's wrestling really, really taking not just steps. We're talking giant leaps forward.
Yes.
Ohio and Iowa just recently being sanctioned by their state high school activity associations. Obviously, the University of Iowa, I think putting the ultimate stamp of legitimacy on women's college wrestling by recognizing and starting a varsity program there. Our teams are performing at unprecedented levels. Memberships coming back. I mean, we're at about 90% of our highest our high watermark ever. So. College wrestling, you saw it this weekend, is as relevant to the American sports community as it's ever been. I mean, we're going to have an absolutely fantastic NCAA championships, I guarantee you, in Detroit. And men's high school wrestling numbers are starting to increase again, right? So you couple that all together, man, it's we're coming into the golden age, and and that's really fun to be a part of and cool to see. I think we have, better communication and cooperation amongst the different facets of wrestling than we've ever had. The Hall of Fame and the Coaches Association and the state chapters and USA Wrestling and, all the folks that are working on wrestling are, it's been our goal, for quite some time is that, we want to push that center tent pole up as high as we possibly can and get as many people in the wrestling tent as we can. Doesn't mean they all have to be necessarily a part of USA Wrestling, but, part of wrestling. So, and there's a lot of reasons to be really optimistic about, the direction that we're headed. I mean, we're hosting Olympic Games in 2028, which, we know that gives those sports that are prepared a big bump and a big lift. And that's not going to be accidental for us to have success in 28, right? We have, leadership like Andy Barth and folks around LA that's going to make sure that the LA 28 games is going to leave a lasting legacy, not just in California, but all across this country. And, we're going to be working really hard to make sure that we have all the competitive success that's possible there. We're going to make sure that we leverage as much international relations capital as we can to have a relevance beyond 2028 internationally for USA Wrestling. And it's a good time to be involved in wrestling.
Well, I don't think I can say anything better than what you just said. I want to just thank you personally for the friendship you've given to my mom and dad and me over the years. And on a very, very personal level, I want to thank you, Gary Bender, Mike Willis, Joe Wedra, Steve Frazier, Lorraine Blubaugh, all the people that have helped me be on the air with you, and the charity events that we run, all the support USA Wrestling has done over the years, sanctioning those, helping us with the silent auction, really giving our event's validity. And that means, just personally, that means a lot to me. And I very proudly say that our podcast is on USA Wrestling. So I just want to thank you for that.
Well, it's a family, and there are few people that I respect and like more than Ron and Jan Mirikitani, and just two of the all-time greats. And man, I mean, two of the best people I've ever met in my life, and just love them and just respect the heck out of them, and just grateful for their support, and just like you said it well. I mean, it's a family, and it takes a lot of hard work. And what was it? I think it was Vince Lombardi said that the definition of a great organization is individual commitment to that group effort. So, right, I mean, it takes an individual commitment by literally thousands of people in this country to push our sport forward. And man, it's fun to be a part of it, and just honored to have a seat at the table.
Well, you have much more than a seat at the table. We're blessed to have your leadership, and these conversations are always really fun for me, and it's even nicer when you let me record them. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it's fun, and anytime, but yeah, it's fun to tell stories. We could maybe schedule another time where we could talk just about John Smith, but
we should do that. It would be very well watched. So I will let you get back to it, sir. For Rich Bender, I'm David Mirikitani. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. We'll speak.
All right, thanks, Dave. Thank you.